I'm Sarah Wyant, and pleased to have the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, Bob Stallman, join us today on Agri-Pulse. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
You did a great job with your opening speech today at the American Farm Bureau Federation annual meeting. And one of the key points that you teed up was the relevance of rural America. You shared with us that Secretary Vilsack had talked to you before he had opened up a discussion on this in December. Tell us, what do you think the outcome is going to be from engaging the general public and the farm community in whether or not rural America is still relevant in the political process?
Well, I hope the outcome of the discussion is how we can be more relevant. And I think that starting that dialogue, starting that conversation that Secretary Vilsack is doing is probably a good thing. You know, we're kind of insulated in rural America, and sometimes we just take for granted a lot of the things we have. We don't think too much about having a focus for the future. And I think if we're going to solve some of the issues that exist in rural America, and by extension, some of those are related to agriculture, we do need to have much more focus and a better unified effort coming out of rural America. So our numbers clearly indicate that we don't have the political votes like we used to. But on the other hand, we have an element of individuals that are very willing to work very hard to promote their positions. And frankly, we have a lot of solid representatives from those areas that certainly want to help their constituents. And so it's more a problem of, I think, planning and focus. And if we can have the relevance discussion in a way that makes us more relevant, the outcome is going to be positive.
One of the other topics you teed up in your speech was the victory that you've had in the regulatory arena against EPA, especially with a poultry farmer in West Virginia. But most people expect the regulatory battleground to continue to expand. What do you see on that front?
Well, I have no doubt that it will expand. That's why in my talk this morning I said we have to be ever vigilant. And this has been occurring, you know, over the past couple of decades, actually, ever since EPA was put in place. You had this constant tendency for regulatory creep to expand current law, to fit new situations and expand authority and, frankly, regulations, and in our case, particularly over agriculture. So it's really a twofold effort, right? Maybe threefold. The first is you want to be sure that the law is being followed. In those cases where it's not being followed and the regulations exceed authority under the law, we will challenge those. Then you need to work in the regulation making process, the rule-making process, where we are in there talking about trying to make rules more common sense and less costly. And then the third way is obviously legislation. Legislation is a little bit difficult to achieve given the nature of the Congress now and then the gridlock and split that's there in terms of passing regulations that actually help benefit our regulatory environment. But on the other hand, we maybe can stop some things from happening, for instance, such as the attempt to expand the definition of navigable water. So all of these things we have to work at constantly, continually, and I expect we will.
One of the other issues that's remaining from 2012 is the extension of the 2008 Farm Bill. Some folks expect that we will just start where we left off and that we'll take the Senate Ag Committee and the Senate passed bill, the House Ag Committee passed bill, and move forward from there. Yet others have suggested that in addition to the food stamp debate, we have to make major changes in the dairy supply management portion of the bill for the House to move it forward. Your view?
I think the dairy issue will be one of the key policy issues that will be teed up as we start talking about the 5-year farm bill to follow our 1-year extension here. You know, and I think there's strong feelings on both sides, and this is going to be a contentious issue. But there's some other ones too. You know, I think now that we've had time to look at some of those provisions, there's some concern that the shallow loss program talked about in the Senate may not work really well as a policy position, both in terms of cost and what it may mean in terms of farmer behavior. And so you have to meld those two different approaches that occurred in the House and the Senate with respect to either a deep loss or more of a shallow loss program. And then you have the target price issue, which obviously is important to southern crop producers. And while the House dealt with that, the Senate did not. So we still have a lot of work to do. But it's not an election year, and that may help the process move along a little bit.
One of the other things that you have championed is, as chair of the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance, the need for farmers to speak out more to the non-farm public. And you've brought up the issue of the importance of transparency and communication. What have been a couple of the biggest lessons you've learned since taking over the chairmanship of that group?
Well, the first lesson is I have to change the way I talk about the issues when I'm talking with consumers, or where the audience is consumers. All of the research, and very extensive research we've done, indicate that our position in the past was to tell them the facts, tell them the science behind what we do. I'm sorry, the consumers don't really want to hear that. They have some questions. They want to know about the long-term health effects of the food they eat, related to how it's produced. And while a lot of them don't have any preformed opinions, they have doubts based on what critics of our production system in this country have put in the media, in the social conversation about food. And so the key with consumers is to connect with them individually, create a dialogue, if you will, answering their questions, acknowledging their concerns, answering their questions. And then in that process, farmers and ranchers have to learn to be a little more transparent. We've been a little bit afraid to talk about what we do in our farms and ranches, both afraid and also thinking that we really don't need to. But I think our research shows that we really do need to make that connection and do that with consumers.
Thank you. Bob Stallman, President of the American Farm Bureau Federation.